there's a lot of really cool things I can teach you guys about raising money and sourcing deals and building out a team and go over case studies on awesome deals that I've done and some big wins that we've had. And I thought, you know what? I think the best learning lessons come from the worst deals and the biggest losses. And my discussion with you guys today is going to be based on a $100 million shitstorm that I've dealt with over the past 2 years. And all the lessons learned, even though I've been in business, like I've been in real estate and brokering and the trades and stuff since 2005, so 20 years in the business, when I was in college still. I started investing in 2009. I started buying single-family houses, fixing them up, flipping them, doing the BRRRR method on single-family, had a small portfolio, and then started buying apartment buildings in 2012. And so we've, as Jennings had mentioned, I've bought over 6,000 rental units. Our current portfolio, we've been liquidating some stuff. I was talking to some guys in the back of the room about how we're refining our portfolio. We're at about 3,000 doors right now. We've sold off a lot of out-of-state stuff, a lot of C-class stuff, a lot of smaller buildings in order to just kind of refine the portfolio. And I think that's a big part of business, is you grow and then you refine, and then you grow and then you refine, and then you grow and then you refine. And so we're in this refinement stage right now where we're selling a whole bunch of our properties and that are out of state, because every new state that you get into, every new market that you start buying properties in, guess what? It's a new business. You got to dedicate another 5 years to understand who all the players are, build out your power team, understand the legalities of it, figure out the marketing efforts, right? There's all these nuances in every single market. Although it's still real estate, although it still might be multifamily real estate, there's nuances in every new market that you get into. And so there's a learning curve. And what happens with learning curves? You lose what? Time and money in learning curves, right? So every new state you get into, realize you're going to lose time, you're going to lose money, versus keeping your head down and going deep in the couple of markets that you really know, where you already have a team built out, where you already have understanding of how the business works in those markets. So I want to share a deal. As I'm growing my portfolio, 2017, I had about 400, 500 doors that I was like a passive partner in. Big deal pops on my plate. Over 700 doors. It was going to take me over the 1,000 door mark in 2018. Bought that, and I started talking about it a lot on social media, right? Facebook came out when I was in college, and so I've always been on social media, and I always wanted to help other people with their lives and with their personal finances. I saw all my buddies just blowing money at the bars and doing stupid stuff and never like thinking about long-term wealth building. And so I started talking about these different deals, these different apartments that I was buying on social media, and that turned into people reaching out to me. How do I buy deals from you? How do I sell deals to you? How do I partner with you on different projects? Excuse me. Can I pay you to coach me? Which then turned into this coaching platform called Commercial Empire. That's what Jennings and Yaden come out to. And the idea was I would partner with people who brought deals. I would sponsor their loans because I had a big enough portfolio and a big enough balance sheet to be able to then sponsor the loans. And at the same time, I could raise money, right? I had this great influence on social media and through the coaching platforms that I could bring money to other people's deals and then arbitrage equity in their deals. And that's a pretty cool model until you realize that people haven't necessarily built the muscle that you've built in order to build the business that you can build. And you find yourself kind of babysitting adults in a lot of capacities. So I'm growing my portfolio. 2018, I bought over 1,000 doors. 2019, I bought 2,000 doors. 2020, I bought another 1,000 doors. I had about a 5,000 unit portfolio at that time, or just shy of that, 4,200 unit portfolio at that time. And I had an unbelievable lifestyle, right? I have more money, more wealth, multiple 8-figure net worth, had bought a house on the beach right here in Charleston, South Carolina, and all lifestyled up, got some really good coaching things going on, and everything was fantastic. And so I'm flying high, everything's going great, and somebody brings a deal from my coaching. And it's a $100 million deal in Houston, Texas. And this $100 million deal was not my deal. He needed me to just sponsor the loan. And when you're flying high and you got win after win after win after win after win, and it's easy to raise money and it's easy, you got all this deal flow, and the one thing I hadn't done was taken down a $100 million deal yet. And so guess what? I'm like, I can take this bad boy down, right? Let me go get a chunk of this $100 million deal. And that's what I did. And so I said, all right, man, I'm in. What do you need from me? I don't need you to raise any money. I don't need you to bring any cash. I only need you to co-sponsor the loan. Because it was this guy, me, sponsoring the loan. And then there was another guy that was supposed to be the cash guy. So they go through the process. They go through all the due diligence. I'm cool. I'm going to sign this loan. I'm going to get about 20% of the deal. And I'm going to make about $5 million in the next 3 to 4 years for passively sponsoring a loan and then staying focused on my other stuff. As we got to closing, this is March of 2021, so about 4 years ago. Spoiler alert, I have not made $5 million in the 4 years on this deal yet. And so March of 21 comes, and we're about to close on the deal, and there's one of our lenders, the debt fund that was going to give us the loan, kind of spun some things off. They said, hey, we can give you higher leverage, and you don't have to bring as much capital to the table, but it's going to be a little bit a different type of a loan. It's going to be a variable rate loan. There's going to be this and that and all this other stuff. And so we're like, oh, well, we have to bring less money, or they said, we have to bring less money. Let's go ahead and do that. So we ended up going with this different loan, which was essentially a layer. There was a senior debt of $55 million. There was a mezz debt, which is like a second loan, of $15 million. And then we had to bring I think it was $7 or $8 million to closing. I wasn't supposed to bring any money, but what always happens at closing? You need more cash, right? So all of a sudden at closing, they couldn't bring the money that they thought they needed to bring. I got to bring $2 million, $2.5 million, like literally a week before. So I call up my investors. Everything was good. The market was great back then. And I call up my investors, and we bring money to that deal. And so I sponsored a loan. We got a little bit more equity. I gave my team some of that equity, but didn't really think about that deal again until about a year and a half later. And the idea here was we bought 550 units in Houston, Texas. It was going to be, we were all in for about $77 million. It was going to be worth a little over $100 million when it was all stabilized. And those are the basic parameters of it. We were taking, it had all these 3 and 4 bedroom units. And so we were taking several of those, chopping them in half and making them 2 units in order to increase the unit count at the time, which made sense at that time. So we're going through the work, and when you're doing a heavy value add, there's just money out the door all the time. And everything's scrambling, but rates were low, right? We had a variable rate loan, so it was very, very low. And we're just hammering away. They didn't ask me for any money in all the rest of 2021 and into 2022. And then all of a sudden, we get a capital call in, I think it was August of 2022. And the management company at the time, we had turned all these units, and we were increasing rents and leasing out a bunch of stuff. And the management company at the time was being bonused over the summer for placing tenants, right, for leasing units. And so the more units that they leased out, the property managers got these big bonuses, and were able to then be incentivized that way. Well, although physical occupancy, you can write this one down, physical occupancy does not mean economic occupancy, right? And so, although it was getting more and more occupied, we weren't bringing in more rents because the management company was placing unqualified people. And these were people who didn't have income, so the management company made it up. These were folks who failed background checks, and they went into, the management company would go into the system, override the failed background check, push it through anyways. They didn't take deposits. Or they did take deposits and put them in their own pocket instead of putting them in the company account. And so the management company placed over 200 unqualified tenants in this property. Do you know what happens when 200 riffraff tenants come into a property? All the good ones leave. And it is an absolute shitstorm. And so we got a capital call saying they needed 300 grand in August of 2022. And so there's a bunch of GPs, like, you know, it was like a big syndication kind of deal. So these other guys couldn't bring all the money. So then they started getting people to raise money for this deal and gave them GP equity because of it and all this other stuff. And so there were like 10 different general partners on this thing, which should be a red flag, all right? Don't get into deals where there's 10 GPs. There should be 1 or 2 decision makers, and that's it. If there's too many people, too many cooks in the kitchen, nobody has any real responsibility over that deal. So everybody's got to contribute money. Several people don't. Some of us have to come up with more cash because other people either couldn't or wouldn't bring that cash. So we get to a point where we contribute $300,000. That's what they needed in order to figure things out. And we didn't know that this blatant fraud had occurred yet. We just thought that there was some additional construction, CapEx stuff going on, and so we didn't really understand what had happened. 2 months later, October of 22, there's another capital call. Hey, we were wrong. Instead of needing 300 grand, we need, I think it was like $500,000 or $600,000. And we're like, what? Hang on. And so we start diving deep before we give any more money. And then within 30 days thereafter, they're like, oh no, it's actually $1.1 million that we need. What is happening right now? What is going on? Get out of the way. There's zero transparency. I have a big problem with third-party property management, a very big problem with it. I don't think that they're aligned with the owners. I don't think that there's enough transparency, and there's not enough control in the operators and in the partners, right, in the owners of the properties. And as we figured this stuff out and we started unfolding what had happened with the property, we realized it wasn't $1.1 million of like aged payables and expenses that need to be covered. We found out it was $3.5 million. Not only had they committed fraud of putting all these unqualified people in the property, but they also were hiding it on the financials for over 6 months. And they gave us falsified financials for over 6 months. Whose fault is that?
Yours.
It's hard to take ownership over something like that when you're in the situation. But the reality is, the buck stops with you. You are the general partner. You are the person who's responsible for the investors, for the lenders, for the team. It's on you. Although they committed fraud, and although we will pursue legal action against them, at the end of the day, it came back to me and the team. Now, I was supposed to be a passive loan sponsor on this thing. We realized what's happening and how much money we need to bring to this. And I go to the 2 partners. One of the guys, good guy, means well, but never built the muscle to be able to go and turn around a deal of this size. You know what I mean by that? There's easy access to a lot of money over the past few years in business, and especially in real estate. And so a lot of people got into the game and were able to then get equity in different deals, but they never built the real muscle. It's like going to the gym, and I got Yaden on this side and Jennings on this side, and I'm benching 300 pounds, man, and they're spotting me, and it's easy, right? But then, all of a sudden, the spotters leave, the market turns, things get a little bit difficult, and I have to bench 300 pounds all by myself, but I never built the muscle. So these guys never built the muscle, right? The one guy, good guy, but never built the muscle. All right? That's still not a great partner to have, because when shit hits a fan, and it always does, they can't help in that situation. And then the other guy had access to capital, comes from a big family office, his grandpa sold a business and has tens of millions of dollars. He's all over social media talking a big game about how great he is and how many doors that he owns and all this other stuff that he's got going on. But he's a piece of shit human being. He's a horrible, horrible person and wouldn't bring a single dollar to help clean up any of these investors. And he's on the loan too, right? So I got one guy who is a bad person, even though he's got access to capital. He's a bad person and isn't willing to contribute to the deal. I have another person who means well, but doesn't have the ability to contribute to the deal. Both of them leave me in a position where neither of them can help, you know? So now the bank is looking at me because I'm the one on the loan with the biggest balance sheet. And I'm supposed to be passive. So I have to step into an active role in this deal because you got to take extreme ownership. Each of us is in the situation that we're in today because of the conferences we attended or didn't attend, because of the books that we read or didn't read, because of the relationships and the friends we hung out with or didn't hang out with, right? It's all based on the choices we made or didn't make is why we are exactly where we are today. And that's exactly why I was in that position 2 years ago, is because of decisions that I made. I took extreme ownership over those decisions. So the buck stops with me. I have to be the one to step up. Now, I've been on a tear and in real estate, and then all this stuff hits the fan, and it comes to a point where it's like, we need $3.5 million. The loan is maturing. It was a 2-year loan that matured in May of 23. Right now it's January of 23. We got a management company with 600 units that defrauded us, so we have to get rid of them. We have, I don't know, I think it was like 30% economic occupancy at the property. So it's not covering debt service, which means I gotta bring hundreds of thousands of dollars a month to feed this deal, another multiple millions of dollars in order to turn all the units, and I have to do it all by May, within 4 months, which is unfathomably not possible, right? So, and our rate cap on our variable rate loan was maturing. What happened to interest rates in 22? What happened to interest rates continued in 23? Just meteoric rise in interest rates. So I bring $1 million in order to just inject it into the property. I move these other 2 partners out of the way. I take 2 of my executives from my team and I move them full time. We halted all other acquisitions in our portfolio. And I moved 2 executives of my team to live on site in this property. Let me tell you what's going on at the property. $3.5 million in age payables. Every contractor's livid, doesn't want to do any work. All the riffraff that was coming in, multiple police calls on a daily basis. Break-ins, thefts, shootings. Because there's no money to do maintenance, they weren't doing any maintenance either. Not that there wasn't any money, but they were using it in order to try to hide their issues. Because of that, the management company wasn't taking care of any maintenance, so the tenants that were there are all moving out that are good tenants that were paying rent, and the people who couldn't move out are living in horrible, horrible setting. Like there's leaks all over the place. They start calling the news. The news is doing reports and Facebook Lives in front of the property on a weekly basis about these slumlords who live out of state who aren't taking care of their property. There's over $1.1 million of delinquent rents, people living there that weren't paying rent for months and months and months. And, and the city was all over us. They sent us a 75-page inspection report of all the things wrong with the property and threatening to take away our certificate of occupancy because of it. So, I go to a mastermind in January of 2023, and I'm sitting in this room, the DM fam. Were you still in at that time? Yeah? You remember when Bobby was in there? Were you there for that day? There's just 15 of us. And I'm usually the guy who's giving out advice, right? And there's a guy in there that comes in, a guest speaker, and there's only 15 of us in the room. And this guy's worth about $500 million. He got a $750 million real estate portfolio, sold his fintech business for over $1 billion, and exited and then got into real estate pretty heavy. And I said, hey man, I need some help. And I raised my hand. You see, I think this is another lesson, is people join masterminds when times are good, when money's flowing, when they want to scale, when they want to grow, when they want to accomplish all these amazing things. The reality is you need masterminds when times are tough, when the walls are caving in, when things are collapsing all around you and you can't see outside of the box that you're in. That is when the real value of masterminds comes in. So I raised my hand, I asked this guy, I said, hey man, what do I do in this situation? All right, here's what's going on, here's what's playing out. He goes, dude, just give it back. And, well, before he told me that, he said, hey, Tim, let me ask you a question. If I would have come to you a couple years ago, before you bought this, and I would have asked you, do you see yourself owning this for the next 50 years and then eventually passing it on to your kids? Is this a type of asset, a type of property that you would want to buy? I said, absolutely not, right? It's an 80s vintage, C-plus class property in Houston, Texas, which is a fine market, but it's like, no, this isn't something that I'd be like, hey, super proud, give to my kids, and then I want them to have to manage and take over and all that stuff. He said, that's the difference between where you're at right now and a guy like Elon Musk, who's worth $250 billion. He thinks on timelines that are 500 years in advance. The longer the timeline you think on, the better decisions you typically make. Right? He's talking about colonizing Mars long after he's gone. And you were trying to get rich in 2 or 3 years off of a single deal. And that's the difference, right? Don't make, and just because you were cocky and confident and egotistical, you took this deal down, you can't make permanent decisions based on temporary circumstances. Write that down. Don't make permanent decisions based on temporary circumstances. And although he told me to walk away from the deal, that line was burned into my brain more so than you should just walk away and not deal with this stuff. Because, one, listen, if you lose money, you don't really lose anything. I know a lot of, I can't lose money. You can always go make money again, right? You lose your health, that's losing something. If you lose your reputation, you lose everything. And especially in this business, where there's not that many people operating at a super high level, and guess what? I got a lot of eyeballs on me through social media. And so if I give a property back, what does that do to my reputation? So in a self-interest way, I didn't want to give the property back. Beyond that, I wanted to make sure that my investors that I had to bring to the table at the last minute, who were like, yeah, I'll write $2.5 million because Tim, I know you're good for it, right? I need to make sure that they're taken care of. There's other people like Kelly Garrett was in that deal. I didn't even bring her into the deal, but I know her money is at stake. You know? So there's people that I care about that I needed to make sure were taken care of in this project. My reputation's on the line. My credit is also on the line. If I give this thing back, I have to check a box on every single loan application for the rest of my life that I handed back a property because things got tough. So I decide I'm going to take extreme ownership because I didn't want to make a permanent decision based on a temporary circumstance in that deal. So I raised $1 million on my own personal credit, personally signed on it, on the loan, from somebody who was willing to give me money at that, even if the deal goes south, Tim, I know that you're good for it. I know you'll make me whole somewhere else. And I kept on raising money month after month in order to feed this thing. Moved 2 of my staff members there. And the plan was, sorry guys, my throat's just super dry. And the plan of attack was, when the walls are caving in and things get hard, and by the way, how many people have been in real estate since before like 2020? Been buying, okay. So they don't talk about this on the news, but in 2008 to 2010, the residential real estate market dropped in value by 29%. And it was all over the news. You guys all remember this, right? Like this, it was the Great Recession of real estate. And it was based on a 29% drop in values. You fast forward 15 years later, from 2022 to 2024, commercial real estate, based on interest rates increasing, based on insurance costs increasing, based on labor expenses increasing, based on energy costs increasing, and everything else getting more expensive, commercial real estate is valued based on the net operating income of the property. And when rents have grown a little bit, but not kept up with the amount of expenses as taxes get reassessed, insurance triples and quadruples in some markets, and all these other things get more expensive, it directly impacts the net operating income. And then the multiple is reduced because of interest rates. Commercial real estate values over the past 2-3 years have been reduced by between 20 to 35%. Has anybody else been facing some headwinds in real estate? Right? Am I the only one? And I'm one of the lucky ones. I refinance most of my stuff into permanent loans in 2021 and 2020. And so this was the only deal. And guess what? I didn't have to do this deal. I didn't have to do it. It didn't change my life. It only made it worse, right? So how do you turn this thing around? You get back to the basics. You guys know RGA, revenue generating activities. That's all that matters, okay? In business, write this down. In business, revenue solves all problems. So if you're generating revenue, you can hire the staff. If you're generating revenue, you can turn more units. If you're generating revenue, you can clean up the deferred maintenance items that the city's pissed about. If you're generating revenue. And so I huddled up with my team. We sent 2 of our executives, one that's a property manager, asset manager, another one that's a construction manager. I went and focused on raising a boatload of cash, and then my COO hopped on a call with these guys and the site level team on a daily basis, every single day, huddled up on a morning call, every day for an entire year. We, one, had to turn out the riffraff. So let me tell you what, like, shootings at the property, we hired a security company to try to, we turned on all the lights, made sure all the lights were working, put out signs of neighborhood watch. We hired a security company. The first day the security company's on site, the security officer gets knocked out with a brick to the back of the head. That's what's happening at this property, okay? That's the circumstance that we're dealing with. He's all right, yeah. I think. I haven't gotten a lawsuit from them yet. So we have the security company, and the first thing you have to do, you can't bring in new tenants until you get rid of the bad ones. So the first thing that we have to do is, while we're taking care of deferred maintenance on existing tenants who are paying their bills, we're also removing all the troublesome tenants who are bringing drugs and crime and prostitution and all that stuff to the property. So cleaning it up, taking care of deferred maintenance, we're turning some units to get them ready for once these people move out, we can then lease up to good qualified tenants, and then removing the unqualified people. So we're doing all those things. In the meantime, we are, as those tenants get moved out, we're marketing this thing like crazy. We're running rental promotions. We need qualified people in. We don't need the highest rental rate in this circumstance. We need qualified, good people to come in and pay rent. And so we drop the rental rates. We run all these promotions, all these kind of concessions is what we call them. And here's gift cards, and here's this and that, and you pay this many months, you get a free month of rent, and coming up with all these different promotional type things that we were doing. And over the course of about 120 days, we were able to get rid of about almost all of the riffraff tenants. We were able to take care of all the deferred maintenance. We were able to inject millions and millions of dollars in order to turn units and start leasing out units. And so the lender was breathing down our neck. You know, the lender's not happy. We had, before we decided to do all this stuff, I said, let's fire sale this property. We're into it for $75 million. The offers that were coming in Q1 of 2023 were $25 to $30 million. So we would have lost all of our equity. The lenders would have lost a lot of their money. Although it was a non-recourse loan, these lenders started saying, we're coming after you because the buck stops with you. And although it's non-recourse, you should have known better. We're coming after you personally. So they could have come after us personally for, they say that, right? One thing I learned is all the lenders are negotiable, by the way, right? So although I had never dealt with that before, all lenders are negotiable, and you can take a little bit more posture than I think most of us think we can with some of these lenders. And so I showed them goodwill over the course of about 4 months. When that loan came due, I said, guys, I need an extension. And so they gave me an extension, but guess what else happened to the rate? It skyrocketed to where rates were in the middle of 23. And so our debt service on this thing was $750,000 a month. And we weren't bringing in that much in rent. And so, it's funny now, right? It wasn't funny then. It was pretty far from it. And so, we got a rate cap, and so that helped a little bit, but it didn't really help. And so we're pouring more money onto this thing to cover up this stuff. But within 9 months, we got rid of the riffraff. We took care of all the maintenance, deferred maintenance. The police actually called us and said, hey, how come we haven't gotten a phone call in a week or two? What's going on here? Something's wrong with the property. The city saw that we took care of all 75 pages of that deferred maintenance type stuff. They actually gave us free grant money because of how much of an impact and how much of a difference we made and the commitment we made to that property. They gave us money to put additional security and like speed humps in and all this other stuff. They gave us free money in a span of essentially less than 9 months. We hired a company because we realized we got to change the reputation too. So we hired a company, some of you guys might know, you know Q from Legacy Digital? Hired them. They have something called reputation management. And so for $250 a month, we had them send out emails and to our all the tenant base and existing tenants and new tenants that we leased to. And they either pressed thumbs up or thumbs down on an internal email. If they pressed thumbs up, our Google reviews were 1.2, right? If they pressed thumbs up, it took them straight to Google and they gave us a 5-star review. If it was a thumbs down, it came to an internal private message thing where we were able to then clean everything up and make sure that the tenant was happy. But that ended up taking our reputation from 1.2 Google stars up to 3.5 Google stars inside 9 months. So now when people Google search our property, we show much better, right? And so now we can attract better quality tenants. The whole thing was cleaning up the riffraff, getting units online so that way they could be leased, and then changing the reputation of the property. We were able to clean up all age payables. We went to all of them and either paid them down. We negotiated discounts on the checks that they hadn't been, on these invoices that they hadn't been paid on for a long time. So we were able to go in and actually negotiate pretty deep discounts on that. Or put people on a financing, put these vendors on a financing plan that allowed us to then pull it out at 0% interest, right, over a length of time. So that way we didn't have to raise more money at high interest rates. And over the course of 9 months, by the fall of 2023, we were still only about 60% occupancy, but we were in a position where there was no more crime. The lender was happy with us. Age payables were down to less than $300,000. The delinquency was down to under $20,000 by fall of 2023, which is unbelievable on a 600-unit property. City was all excited, right? They're giving us free grant money. Our reputation on Google had gotten better, but we're still sinking money into this thing. And all the cash that I had raised, nobody wants to bring money for a sinking ship. So the way that I had to structure it was I paid very high interest rates, like 3% per month, which ends up being like 36% a year on some of this debt. But I knew that if I could get it there, that then I could refinance into lower rate, or I could bring in LPs at a lower rate once this thing was mostly stabilized. So the way that I was able to then, it was about $10 million that we injected in 2023. And the way that we were able to then turn that around was at the end of 2023, realizing these couple of partners didn't carry their weight, and I saved them from having a foreclosure on their record, we got everybody to agree to take care of their own investors outside of this deal, and we were going to sell the deal for the face value of what we were into it for the debt. And so we created a new single-purpose entity. So, you know, imagine it's 123 Main Street, and then we create 123 Main Street Holdings. 123 Main Street Holdings bought 100% of the interest in 123 Main Street LLC and created a new cost basis of $80 million, let's call it, $85 million. What that does is, even though I'm paying, you know, a 10% return, like nobody wanted to come into a sinking ship. And even though I could say, hey, I'll pay you 10 or 12%, people still weren't incentivized enough by that. So by closing a deal in the end of the year and creating a new cost basis, I was able to remove these other bad partners from the deal and create a new cost basis that allowed us to depreciate, cost segregate, right, and depreciate. You guys talk about that? Depreciate this, and I had, it was about $15 million of depreciation that then I was able to then specially allocate to these new investors to come into this deal. So this is money that they were going to pay the taxes anyways, and I was able to then give them a huge incentive to come into this deal instead of paying it to Uncle Sam. That allowed me to then recapitalize the project, pay off the short-term debt money, and get rid of the troublesome partners who didn't carry their weight. And so in 2024, we're still going through the lease up. We're still burning cash, leasing this thing up. And we only got a 12-month extension on the loan. So we had to renegotiate another extension on the loan, and our debt service was like, on the $55 million, it was like 10%, and then it went up to 20% on $15 million of mezz debt. So like our debt, it was just through the roof how much this was costing us, and we had to refinance. But you can't refinance because rates kept on going up. Finally, they kind of stalled a little bit in 2024, thankfully. But we got to a point where we got occupancy up to 92%. And by getting occupancy up to 92% and collections up there as well, last month we collected $850,000 in rent. This is a $10 million a year gross revenue property. And we were able to refinance that debt and the mezz debt into, I think it was like 6.5 or 6.3% interest rate loan. Completely turned this thing around by controlling the controllables. There's a lot of adverse stuff that can happen to all of us in business. There's a lot of arrows that we take, but our life isn't defined by what happens to us, right? It's defined by how we respond to what happens to us. By not worrying about the things that are outside of our control, but really focused on the things that are inside of your control. Controlling the controllables. And the controllables in business is simply revenue-generating activities. This is the revenue line. The farther away from the revenue line you get, the more time you're wasting, the more money you're losing. You got to stay, as the CEO of your company, in line with the revenue line. Maybe 1 degree away, and then coming right back. That is what you're focused on. Those are the controllables that actually matter. And in real estate, it's not many. It's having rent-ready units, it's taking care of the paying tenants, and it's leasing and obsessing over marketing and obsessing over leasing. If you're doing those 3 things, you can turn around any difficult sinking ship that you might be dealing with in your business. And so regardless of what the business is, it's revenue-generating activities and obsessing over those things and controlling the controllables. So is this my timer? Oh, dude, perfect time, bro. So a couple lessons learned, right? One is find business partners that are good people and have means and resources or resourcefulness, right? They got to check both of those boxes. If you got people who you're partnering with that don't bring both of those things, they're not good values, they don't do the right thing, do not partner with them. If they don't have the ability or willingness to bring money or find money or do those tough tasks when things get difficult, I'd think twice about partnering with them. So be careful on who your partners are. Take 100% ownership over your deals. Have a long-term mentality. I was talking with some guys out in the back of, Tim, you're still buying, what are you buying? I would obsess over getting to $10 million in property value and assets under management as soon as possible. I know this is your first multi-million or first million in multifamily. Get to your first 10 million in multifamily. Regardless of the property, even if it's C-class, even if it's a small unit, small building, whatever, get to $10 million. Once you're at $10 million of property value, you can now qualify for 98% of every real estate deal in the entire country from a lending perspective. You are bankable enough to now qualify for that. $10 million. So you got to sprint, which is like 100 units, you know? Get to 100 units. If you're in multifamily, if it's in commercial or net lease or whatever else, that's fine too, but just get to $10 million of property. Now you can qualify for almost everything. From there, be selective, right? Have a long-term vision. Is this something that you want to own, not for the next 5 years, but for the next 10 years, for the next 20 years, for the next 50 years, that you feel so confident in this deal that you want to hold it for that long and you'd be okay handing it down to your children because it's that good of a property, right? Focusing on revenue-generating activities, controlling the controllables. 99% of all issues out there in real estate, and all the headaches out there in real estate, are handled if you take care of the property and you screen your tenants. Those 2 things are done. It eliminates 99% of the crazies. Now, there's still 1% of crazies that come in, right? That still happens. But it eliminates majority of the headaches. The other thing, and I'll kind of leave you with this. I've had a lot of clarity, a lot of reflection, a lot of understanding of like, what am I doing here? And what's my buy box moving forward? And as all this stuff kind of crumbled around me, we got to a point where I was like, who are the people I look up to in real estate? Who are the biggest balance sheets? Who are the most successful? Who have the best lifestyle, right? I don't really care as much about money. I care about lifestyle. And they all fell into, there were 5 commonalities amongst the biggest developers, landlords, real estate investors that I knew. Number 1, they bought good properties. Typically stuff that was, built 25 years or newer, or they built it themselves. They bought good properties. 2, they bought in good areas. Decent school districts, transportation, enough jobs, population growth. Call it B, B+, A- type of areas. Landlord friendly. 3, they put good debt on the properties. Fixed rate, long amortization schedules, long terms, negotiable prepayment penalties, or something that you'd be at least okay with paying out if you had to. Good properties, good areas, good debt. Number 4, surprising, but makes a lot of sense after what I went through, they all in-house manage, every single one of them, in-house property manage. Every single one of them, because they have transparency over financials, they have control over it. It's why we developed Smart Management, our property management software that will be released this year. I'll keep you guys posted on that, or I'll keep Jenny Ziaden posted on that, but it's like in math class in 3rd grade. It's like, show your work, right? Right now, the property management companies don't have to show their work. This forces them to show their work. So it creates complete transparency, reconciled financials on an hourly basis. You don't have to wait until the 15th of the month in order to make reactive decisions based on what happened last month or 6 weeks ago. You can make proactive decisions. So, all this stuff has culminated into this. And I know nobody wants to go through the dark, dark days that I had to go through, but it has made our team friggin' bulletproof of their level of confidence of the deals that they can then take down. And then number 5 was they hold it forever. They never plan to sell. They just refinance every 5 to 10 years. They pull a bunch of money out tax-free, put it in their pockets, make improvements to the property, and they do it again for the next decade. Cash flow, cash flow, cash flow, tax-free money. Cash flow, cash flow, cash flow, tax-free money. Good properties, good areas, good debt, in-house management, hold it forever. Is that helpful for you guys?